Well, it's not a good morning. I was first considered by Claude Betts to be your morning wake-up call after our brilliant evening, but now I am your kind of bring you back from the coffee break person. I'm going to talk about something that has been done by the World Federation of Public Health Associations, and that what we think is useful and important for all people who want to do and promote public health worldwide. First of all, I have to thank you for inviting me to this, your beautiful country, and having so beautiful dancing. That's really, I appreciate, as you know. As you heard, indeed, I am a professor of global health now at the University of Geneva, but I started as a pathologist. So for the first 15 years of my academic and professional career, I looked for diseases and the causes of diseases and the causes of ill health under the microscope. But I realized that causes of diseases and causes of ill health are definitely outside the microscope, and I left my microscopic view to turn to a broader macroscopic and even global view. And somehow people ask me, well, you left the microscope for going around the world? And I said, yes, I'm not the only one, and I want to allude to a personality that has been already introduced by Dr. Calvo from Bolivia, and the person whom in history of public health we all know, Rudi Virchow, who definitely started with the, at those days, very fancy technique that was a microscope. He described pathology, and he later on realized that cause of ill health is outside, and he became a defender of freedom, of individual rights, was working against poverty in Berlin, at those days a growing city, and he is now considered the founder of public health. So I have my excuses for leaving the microscope and going to global health. But let me first, before we come back to this, walk you through my talk. I will not talk, you have heard a lot about social determinants of health. I will talk more about how we can do it, and who can do it, and where we can do it, the tools and the actions. And that's why I'm going to talk about the Global Charter for the Public's Health and its key points. Well, yes, indeed, Rudolf Virchow was acting as a professor of pathology in Berlin when the German Kaiser asked him to explain why there was typhus in Upper Silesia, at those days a part of the Prussian Empire. And he went there and he came back with a report that says it's clear the causes of this typhus epidemic are people are poor, people have no access to housing, to sanitation, they have no education, and worst of all, they don't have any clue to lead an independent life. So finally, he described social determinants in health while writing this report. We have now, some almost 200 years later, a very good today's body of evidence about the importance of social determinants in health. Michael Marmot is here. The report was commissioned by WHO and then came to a political level. The next year, it was accepted by the World Health Assembly, and there was also the Rio political declaration. So, in fact, on the global political level, we have a support for doing what we are discussing here. But while we were also discussing the social determinants of health, another thing happened, and these were the Sustainable Development Goals as a follow-up of the Millennium Development Goals. And you know that especially the last point asked us to work together to create alliances to implement things. And these has to be looked at, I think, with a determinants of health, social determinants of health approach. If you go through the single points of the SDGs, you see that a lot of them have already parts of what we would say action in favor of diminishing the social determinants of health. But there is now also a UN-level joint statement on a UN platform trying to get together the different UN organizations on the social determinants of health lens or view on the SDGs. So also at the global level, we have very good documents that give us the right to act on social determinants of health, and this is first of all, the Constitution of WHO, and on the other hand, also the Declaration of Human Rights. These are binding, broad, global documents that clearly say that action on social determinants of health is what we should do. But health inequities, we know, are unjust and avoidable. And we, as we heard all the time, the wish is to create finally better and equitable societies. So how can we do that? First of all, and in every local place, like here in Panama or like in Switzerland, situations may change. There may be a special thing there, a special thing there, but the way we go forward is probably always the same. And that's why I want to go about what we're doing to get them. First of all, we have to identify the sources, the indicators, collect what we call have evidence. And once we have evidence, we can act. But, as you know in public health, sometimes we are urged to act also without the 100% of evidence. And we have to know that. We have to be evidence-based, but also action-focused in the same time. And when we have the data, our most important task is to disseminate them. Not only talk to each other, what we really do very well, but also go to the outside world and give our data to people who should know them, which means we are coming into the field of advocacy. And one thing I would like, a little point I would like to make here, whatever we do, we have to make sure that this is based on, the policies are based on non-discrimination, gender equality, and responsiveness to special needs. A little point about gender. I'm very thankful to Michael Marmot to have been already talking about gender as a social determinant of health. But my additional point what I would like to make is gender is, in addition, a point for world peace. There are very good data that show that a state's stability and peacefulness is clearly depending how women are treated in these countries. And the data, you can find them on Women's Stats base, are really amazing. It does not depend from the democracy or the ethnicity or the religion of a country, but it clearly is linked to how women are treated. And there are broad democracies that are far more unstable, and women have not been treated very nicely in these countries. So, and the second point, I think that is very important, and we perhaps in this part of the world or in Europe underestimated, but we are looking at a time bomb in terms of gender. In Asia, already in 2005, and now far more, in 2005, 163 million women were missing. Missing means either sex-selective abortion, or that you kill the female babies, or you just don't give them any food. This is a time bomb. Imagine the millions of young men who will never enter society because they cannot find a woman. There are already Asian countries where men go to neighboring countries to buy women. And I think this is a factor of instability we definitely sometimes underestimate in our countries. If you want to learn more about, you can see these data on women's stats, where you have, for example, maps of the world where you see how women are treated and how their physical security is. Or, like this here, very nice graph that shows clearly if countries have laws, family laws that protect families and women and men, then these countries are stable, more stable than those countries that have the very equitable, have high stability, whereas the very inequitable have unstable situations. Data which I would encourage you to look at. But now let's do it. How do we do, and what do we need to do and to implement what we want to do? Usually the most important and most difficult step in public health. And that's why the World Federation created the Global Charter for the Public's Health. Please look at the public's health. We wanted to call it public's to make sure it's all our business, it's for all of us, and it's not public health for some officials in an administration, but it's all our health, the public's health. The Global Charter was launched in May this year at the World Health Assembly and was well recognized already by health ministers of the Commonwealth, and we are trying to get all of you involved. All of you who want to comment on the Global Charter are invited. The associations, public health, already got the document to get their feedback and say, this is what we think about your document. Why and what kind of charter? That you could say there are a lot of charters in public health, and indeed we build on the charters of Alma Ata or Ottawa or others, but these charters mainly looked at a topic like primary health or health promotion. We just, with this charter, want to say, what are the competencies we all need to go ahead? And especially if we want to go ahead with these 17 SDGs and do it, we all are needed. Everyone, every single one is needed. So we have to see how do we best do it. Finally, the whole thing started when we had a discussion with Margaret Chen in her office. And she said, you as a public health associations out there, what is public health for you today in today's global setting? And we went out to make a Delphi round study with a lot of people, some of you here in the room, to see what they think public health is and should be. And the result is the Charter. And the Charter is, in fact, more a tool or describes what we need, basic needs for doing public health. It's based on the adoption of the basic public health principles, that it's cross-sectoral, but the tool nominates what we need. And in the core here you have what we want. We want to keep health, to protect, promote, and prevent it from danger, but what we need are the enabler functions around here: information, governance, advocacy, capacity, which is also education. And I will come to these 4 enabler functions. The first of all is education, research, and capacity. I think all of us in this room agree, but there is a double component to the word of education. On one hand, it is a social determinant in itself of health. We have seen that in the previous day and also today. But on the other hand, we also have to educate our similars and the public, everybody. For example, when we launched the Charter, we said it's nice that the Charter is presented around in WHO and that the public health community sees it and adopts it, but we also went to a public event in the city of Geneva and asked some public health of professionals from the WHO to answer the public's question. And I think that is something what we do not do enough, go and see the people who really have questions. I can tell you that some WHO professionals had difficulties answering questions from citizens in Geneva. And for me, education is always the professional education, the health workforce education, but also the education of ministers, of diplomats, health diplomacy, and the public. And the public, that's us, that's not the others, that's us. That's also talking to my colleague of genetics in the Faculty of Medicine, who says, oh, is there something else in the origins of cancer than genes? And I have to explain him that, yes, there may be other factors. The second point, as enabler function for promoting social determinants, public health, is information. And information in a good way. In a way, I think, bring your evidence, have your evidence yourself, and I think we have a brilliant leading example among us. Sir Michael Marmot is informing very, very distinctly Swedish politicians as Panamese politicians, and with bringing this information, he brings things forward, which I would call then our task of advocacy. He probably is the best advocate we can have. So we may have single advocates, or we may be a group like a public health association, or we maybe even more public health associations together and say, we are pleading for this cause. And the last of the 4 enabler functions that are in this charter is governance. Governance would mean that if we take the social determinants approach, we need coordination, we need alignment with different sectors, with different stakeholders, and if we look at what we do at local level, we know it's always linked to a national or supranational level. You talked this morning about what you get as income from the canal. Yes, this income from the canal is kind of linked to the world economy. And so if it comes back to your contributions, you can just not isolate. I live in Switzerland, which is a country that sometimes wants to isolate itself, but it's just impossible. And I think that also Brexit will not allow Britain to be splendidly isolated, even if it's an island. We do live together, and all our public health at a certain point of time is also global health. In addition, we need governance too. I think yesterday someone asked Sir Michael Marmot about corruption. And yes, we need governance because we as civil society and others have to keep people accountable. Governance means, I have here a picture of the Magna Charta, that power from the state, it was a king at those days, was given to people who did not have the power. And this shift of power, for me, is where we come in, the role of public health associations. Why do we have an important role? Because we are civil society organizations. We can freely talk to politicians, we can interact or collaborate, we can create alliances, and we can dissolve them. We are not bound to rules that states have to absorb or politicians. But I think that we as civil society do not fully exploit our possibilities that we have, and I think we are on our way to doing more. And to do more, I think coordination is the key word. Do the international organizations coordinate itself? I can tell you, I do live in Geneva, I see them. It's a very slow process. For example, the health people start to talk to the environment people. It's the UNEP talking to WHO, but it's a very long process. And for global governance to do this, it's quite difficult because global governance doesn't exist. Global governance includes different states, different nations, regional and international organizations, and this is a difficult coordination. But we also do not have an international jurisdiction. We do have no incentives to do something together, and a collaboration in between countries. And unfortunately, until very recently, international collaboration was left to states only. But now I think civil society comes in, and here we are. I think that the World Federation, as an umbrella organization of all the public health associations worldwide, can do something. We promote public health as civil society organizations in our countries. We advocate because we have a ground experience. You have here, I heard this morning, very clear examples of what you can show. And what we do at the World Federation, we do monitor how things are done at ground level, how people in different countries perceived the famous Millennium Development Goals, and their report was different from the one that the governments gave back on the Millennium Development Goals. We do policy dialogues. We go directly to WHO. We campaign for change, for example, for trade agreements, and we build the advocacy capacity among our members with fellowship programs, but more importantly, we go together. And I think it's not easy to work together. This was les États généraux in the French Revolution. You see that these gentlemen, at those days only gentlemen, could speak out very good in public, had problems. But I was here and looking at what happened with the alliance of the Americas, and was deeply impressed, because the Global Charter asks for political engagement, cross-sectoral policies, advocacy and education, governance, advocacy, education, information. And what we did here was almost the first step. So our charter is only tools and enabler functions, and especially the ones that I think are extremely well represented by Sir Michael Marmot, who has the evidence, who brings the information to people who should know it, who is a perfect advocate, and who probably will always have an eye on Athens. I may conclude here by telling you that when you act at the local level and you have this thing just right in front of you, like the big food there, the microscopic view, you always have a broader view behind you. Whatever you distribute here as money to the population will come in or go back somewhere else. And the most important thing that I was really deeply impressed here was that after only 1 year of work, the public health associations of the Americas joined here in Panama. This is something you would not be able to do with nation states. Nation states, even 15 of the Americas, Canada, US, Bolivia, Panama, and so forth, coming together. Could you imagine what it takes? We as civil societies have been coming together in Cuba first time, and now there is an alliance. I think the colleagues are already writing up the minutes of the meeting. This is just what we can do. We are far faster than nation states can be. In summary, I think when we do public health, we need the evidence to plan, we need our policies right, but we also need patience. Sometimes things are not moving as fast as we want. Only the Association of the Americas went fast, but other things take time. And we also have to be opportunistic. Sometimes you meet the right person or the right minister somewhere, or there is an open eye, and you have to use the possibility. And you have to persist. Never give it up. Go ahead. Just if people look at you and say, you're crazy, this will never work, you know, we're a corrupt state, and blah, 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 blah. Just persist. Never give it up. And yes, it sometimes is too slow, but I think I would like to thank you for being so patient, of listening to a global topic. You were discussing Panama, and I would like to call upon all of us to say, keep calm and start a revolution. Thank you.